Whenever you want to start.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Gonzalez, and today I will be discussing the zero tolerance policy and its effects on Latin American children. On May 7th, 2018, the Trump administration instated the zero tolerance policy to respond to the recent surge in migrants coming to the United States. Prior administrations have had immigration laws, but they all have maintained this principle no-go zones, where you cannot deport someone if they are in church, school, in a hospital, and you cannot separate families. The zero tolerance policy abolishes this, and you are allowed to separate families, specifically the 98% of Latin American families that have been separated. 2,654 children have been separated due to the zero tolerance policy. Which leads me to my question: to what extent has the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy affected the well-being of Latin American children immigrating to the United States? My argument is the zero tolerance policy has inflated the separation of young children from their parents, and the hostile conditions that the Latin American kids experience will stunt their brain development and cause detrimental effects in their future. Leads me to my first claim. The child's stifled relationship with their parent stunts their brain development and leads them to lower their cognitive ability. As soon as the Border Patrol officer separates their child from the parent, the child's prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped and does not know how to respond. The sympathetic nervous system decides to take over and sends a rush of adrenaline and cortisol to the brain. The American Pediatric Association president, Dr. Colleen Kraft, states that the cortisol is toxic to the brain and ultimately kills brain cells, lowering cognitive ability. A limitation to this is that we do not know what happens in every single detention center. In fact, they're extremely private, so we don't know exactly how the child is experiencing the separation at first hand. And implication is that no matter what, according to Angela Petrovnik, who is a professor at the University of Cincinnati in psychology, she says that no matter what, the separation will wreak detrimental effects in the child's future.
Don't worry, Elizabeth.
I'm so
Hang
sorry.
on, just hang on a second. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
This slides look very similar. That was the right slide.
First slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, it's fine. Go ahead and just keep going.
Okay, so another perspective is the academic success of the children. So the migrant parents fear putting their child in school because if they now under the zero tolerance policy, they can be deported and separated from their child if they are found out that they are an illegal immigrant. Also, the cognitive deprivation that the child experiences, according to Luis Zayas, the author of the Forgotten Immigrants, he states that the Latino children's brain development will affect their school success. Implication of this, according to William Land, professor at Harvard University, he states that the children will have significantly lower IQ scores compared to their peers. Moving on to my second claim, depending on the type of detainment that the child is experiencing, it will cause different psychological stressors that they will experience throughout their lifetime. So unhealthy detainment is the caging of kids, which is recognized by the American Psychological Association as it ensues immediate fear, which will lead to PTSD and other psychological disorders such as depression and anxiety in their future. However, there is a healthy form of detainment called Casa Padre, which is a rundown Walmart that they remodeled, and that has cots for the kids, counselors, they have phone calls a day to their parents, and they have a lunchroom and a cafeteria, and they truly cater to the needs of the child. However, a limitation of Casa Padre is that it already has maxed out its capacity and it's only for boys. Moving on to my third claim, Migrant children's distant relationship with their parents can cause a lack of attachment, which will lead to complications in the family dynamic in their future. So when the child is reunited with their parent, their instantaneous response is they feel anger and resentment that the parent would even leave them because they are so young that they don't comprehend why the parent would have left them. The parents feel relief at first, but it's met with the guilt that their child has had to suffer this. And this is all according to Irina Todorova, a professor at the University of Cincinnati as well, and physiology science. Overall, the anger that the child feels and the guilt that the parent feels alters the family dynamic and changes the attachment that is experienced. But a major limitation about this is we cannot observe the family dynamic prior to separation since they do not know they were going to be separated, so there's no way to quantify how the dynamic has changed. So, is the zero tolerance policy ethical? As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, any law that uplifts personality is just, and any law that degrades personality is unjust. Any statute of segregation is unjust as it distorts the soul and degrades personality. These children are being put in cages and ripped apart from their family. It's degrading their personality, and like Dr. King said, the zero tolerance policy, what it is doing is truly unjust and unethical. And if you take away the politics from the situation, all that is left is the children.
And I can give you 30 more seconds since you have an issue.
The conclusion that I have came to is that the zero tolerance policy meant to be enforced to reprimand the 5% of Latino immigrants that are criminals, in turn has affected the thousands of children who are separated from their parents, and they will have to experience these effects throughout their lifetime. A solution I have is we need more, if this policy were to continue, we need more facilities like Casa Padre. We need more nonprofit organizations to step up and put on these charities for these immigrants so they can be provided the resources that they need. However, I do have an ideal solution. The zero tolerance policy was set in place to maintain the safety of America. However, in doing so, it has compensated the well-being of Latin American children. And ultimately, I believe that this zero tolerance policy must be repealed because when you take the politics all out of it, as I said, all that is left is the children.
All right, let me ask you your questions. First question I have for you is, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it in your presentation?
I gathered evidence about Mary Ainsworth, which is a psychologist who found all the different types of attachments that a child experiences and how separation can affect the child and how they can move from ambivalent attachment to secure attachment. However, the reason I didn't use it was because the other research that I had from Irina Todorova about attachment proved my point about immigration separation, whereas Mary Ainsworth was simply a generalization to all separation, which could have been like leaving your child at the daycare for an hour.
Okay. Second question, explain the level of certainty that you have about your conclusion and your solution.
I'm absolutely certain, because what I think as I was going through my research, I really wanted to make sure that I provided an unbiased opinion on this issue. I wanted to solely focus on the children and take away the politics out of it. And in doing so, I was able to come up with the conclusion that the zero tolerance policy is not ethical and it does need some alterations. And there are some statutes in the U.S. government. We can go back to the immigration law set in place by the previous administrations, but fundamentally, the zero tolerance policy, which was solely set to, as an immigrant comes to the United States, they'll be prosecuted as a criminal. If that itself was the only implication to this, then it would be okay, but the fact that it's separating families, which was what my entire argument's over, makes me certain that it's unethical.
Thank you very much.